The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, Caleb Hanks, and I am joined as always with the astute Dr. Captain Austin Burgess. Brother, how are you this evening?
I am doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Brother, I am crop dusting into this beautiful episode, and I could not be more excited.
Oh, I smell it now.
I know. Good Lord. I am a professional crop duster. You know, you got to have a couple of side hustles to make it in the world today. But hey, I just got to shout out real quick at the top of this episode. Our listener, Ron, was so nice enough to find a magical little piece of history and send it on to us at Ghosts in the Mountains. And man, Ron sent us this really, really cool vintage ghost town.
The cursed one.
The cursed one from our Maggie Valley Ghost Town episode, but a piece of memorabilia from there. It's really cool. It's got this kind of like carved out actual like wooden handle that's got brackets that connect it to the mug, and then all these little images of Ghost Town. They probably sold 1 million of those things back in the day, but you probably don't see a lot of them floating around these days.
Yeah, when I saw it, I just kind of pictured that's what they would sell you the root beer in. I don't know, just imagining this completely off the top of my head, but
I completely hear you. It's got kind of like a brown look to it, so it's got that root beer feel. It feels like a little barrel or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
That thing is so cool. And Ron, seriously, thank you very much for sending that along. We just opened it up a little bit ago, so that was awesome, and cannot wait to set that among our other spooky accoutrements, along with our beautiful wooden sign that Amanda over at Blazing Pines Pyrography made of us, a little Ghost in the Mountains symbol. Amanda, thanks for that. Your piece is going to be hanging out with Ron's spooky mug.
His cursed mug.
Yeah, his cursed mug. All right, that down, we got a really wild one for you tonight, because I don't know if I've really talked too much about this, maybe ever on the podcast, maybe on the midnight broadcast, the post show, but as you saw from the title, we're going to be talking about crop circles today. Now, I actually had when I think about it now, it's like how weird, like Bizarro World X-Files is that just me and Joshua P. Warren one time got to go out and investigate the only crop circle I've ever seen in person here in Western North Carolina. And we were only out there for a few hours, but I'm genuinely blanking on where it was. Because, this was 2005, but I think we've kind of narrowed it down.
I think I've got it pinned down to exactly which one it was. And
all right.
I'll kind of see if your memory starts sparking when we get
I'm sure it probably will.
The recap on some of those.
Yeah.
But
all I remember is that it was somewhere around here, wasn't too far out. But as you were telling me at the top of the show, you and I have just kind of been generally interested in this, as whether you want to attribute it to aliens or a cultural phenomenon. It's very interesting no matter what, even from a cultural standpoint. But it turns out that Western North Carolina has had a hell of a lot more activity than we ever imagined it could with this stuff.
yeah, especially in, crop circles are kind of a specialized subsect of the paranormal that often gets lumped into the whole UFO alien side of things. But it's its own kind of interesting spin on it. And I do think it's really interesting of all the places, maybe not in the world, but at least here in America, Western North Carolina specifically seems to have had its own flap, should we say, in a certain time period of that.
North Carolina's got a lot of flap.
Yeah, for sure. But let me back up some here just to kind of like introduce the whole concept of a crop circle, because I think the term can refer to a couple different things, but I think most people think of what we're talking about here today, like a large kind of geometric pattern that's formed in like typical agricultural fields, typically corn, but I doesn't necessarily have to be confined to corn. They're made by flattening the crops, bending them. I guess it's found in wheat, barley, hay, corn, and rye. But instead of, like I said, without breaking or uprooting the plants, the stalks are bent at the base and they're kind of laid down in this swirling pattern. And that's kind of the big indicator on ones that are kind of differentiated from being a hoax and ones that are kind of categorized as left in that unexplained realm.
Yeah. Potential mini Tunguska blasts.
Yeah. So the designs on these things are pretty crazy from everything I've seen. It's everything from, just traditional little small, simple circles to everything from like crazy elaborate fractal patterns and just like sacred geometry shapes. I've seen everything from like DNA helix type formations and even like an alien face that looks just like, a gray alien or something like that.
And also the big smiley face over off Sweeten Creek Road.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, technically it's not a crop circle, but hey, it's the closest thing you got in proximity to us, at least as far as we know.
Yeah, I mean, technically it is a crop circle, I guess, when you categorize it that way.
Yeah, it's a yard circle.
Yard circle, yeah. A lawn circle, if you will. So the term crop circle was actually coined in the early 1980s, but before that, they were called saucer nests.
Why didn't that stick? That's amazing.
That's a better term for sure.
I mean, I think crop circles rolls off the tongue a little better.
Yeah.
But saucer nest? That's amazing. That sounds like you're going to go out there, hit a stick, and a bunch of aliens are going to pop out.
Right. And I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about like how this phenomenon specifically got attached to the whole UFO topic to begin with, when they're being called saucer nests for years before the term crop circles caught on.
That's really odd to me that I've never heard that term, but I love it.
I guess it went out of style when crop circles came around.
Yeah.
Officially. But yeah, it's interesting because the UFO connection, while it's tropey, it seems like it, might be a little bit of a fabrication. It has some popular entertainment media elements going along with it. It does seem to kind of have its own attachment throughout the whole span of this topic across history. So at least interesting that it's been consistent, if nothing else.
All right. Well, tonight, Austin is going to single-handedly solve if aliens made these.
I completely went into this episode being like, oh yeah, all crop circles are just a hoax and there's nothing to them. And, I'm kind of scratching my head the more I come out of this. So we'll see.
That's interesting to hear.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, crop circles have appeared alongside everything from UFO sightings to cattle mutilation reports to abduction accounts. And just, every kind of reoccurring cluster of high strangeness that's associated with UFOs kind of gets lumped into this. It's always, you get one or you get kind of a collection of all these things going on. But particularly from the 1970s through 1990s, these crop circles really seem to be popping up in the same communities that were experiencing these flaps of high UFO activity at the same time. And kind of an interesting point to make here, Wiltshire, England, is known as the global ground zero of crop circles. And it was actually known as the UFO hotspot before the circles started appearing there. So you'll kind of see that association throughout everything we're going across today, from crop circles to the UFO sightings to, the cattle mutilations and some of the other stuff. It's all kind of baked into one.
Sure.
And, just before we start going into the full backstory on this, I do kind of want to just cover my personal experience with that, since you had your direct experience in a crop circle, boots on the ground, which is pretty impressive. I don't think many people can say that. So that's
I remember it was actually Adidas on the ground because I remember in the picture that was what I was wearing. I was dressed like your typical Blink-182 fan. I had like the low cut shorts or whatever and backwards hat.
Oh, we need to find these pictures.
I had it for the longest time.
Yeah. So my connection to this, probably not surprising, goes back to the San Luis Valley, because that's kind of, well documented on this show. That's where my interest in the UFOs and high strangeness kind of started to take place, because it was such a hotspot for activity like that. And honestly, it seemed like it was just primed for a perfect place for these crop circles to be popping up too. But in fact, it does have a ton of crop circles, but not the kind that I was just discussing here. They're these center point irrigation crop circles. That's basically, they form when this perfect circle that's visible by satellites or flights over, and it's formed by just this rotating sprinkler system that just like rotates around one point. So it looks really weird when you're flying over the valley. You can even just look at it on Google Maps, just like look up Alamosa, Colorado, and just kind of zoom out of the whole area. You'll see all these weird green circles, geometrically perfect circles all over the valley. Nothing, paranormal about them in nature, but they're still technically crop circles, if you will.
A few times when I was flying, I would see like huge circles they have to do something. I'm assuming they're the same thing, but I would always be looking at that like, what exactly is going on with this?
Yeah, they basically have like the center point where the sprinkler system is just like rooted in the middle, and it just rotates 360 around to form this perfect circle of crops that it's watering. So
Maynard from A Perfect Circle would be proud.
Very impressed. So anyways, you'd think if there's anywhere in America that should be generating these paranormal crop formations, it'd be the San Luis Valley, because they have a ton of these regular crop circles already.
And other weird shit.
And the UFOs to go along with it. But there's actually something that I came across this week when I was researching this topic. It is the Independent Crop Circle Research Association, the ICCRA, which I don't know if that's even rolls off the tongue any better, but either way, ICRA. So they have this full database of basically everything they found reported in newspapers across history to people writing in today, reporting, basically discovering crop circles. And it just tracks all these formations across 50 states. The reports go back to the 1880s when they're just going back through historical records trying to find stuff like this. So I went in trying to find stuff in the valley, and there's only 2 accounts of crop circles being reported in the San Luis Valley, which I thought was surprisingly low for the area. Ever.
Weird.
Well,
I guess there's not a lot of corn out there.
Yeah, it's potatoes mostly. So, but I mean, there's still, barley that goes along with that, because there's a lot of barley and wheat, stuff that's grown out there. They actually have a Coors barley tower out in one of the areas in the valley that supplies the barley that goes in the Coors.
Oh, nice.
Brewed up in Golden. But there's the one report I will say, it's kind of an all-encompassing report, because it says it's from Antonito, the San Luis Valley, Crestone, which is the town we'll be staying in, and then Conejos County. So it's kind of just like, it lists 4 general places all across the valley, and it just says 12 circles and pasture grass discovered near cattle mutilation. And that's pretty much the only thing. But I would kind of count that as 12, potentially 12 separate accounts. I don't know how many of these circles were all like conjoined into one area or whatnot, but this just seems like it's an all-encompassing report that got lumped into just one report that was reported from September 23rd of 1996. Okay. So the one common element is that they were all discovered near cattle mutilations, which was kind of going through a bit of a mini flap in that area during that time.
Yeah.
Not quite the one that they had in the 70s that we kind of discussed previously, but still stuff was going on in the mid 90s around there.
Yeah, and as we've mentioned on the show, when Austin's saying we'll be staying in Crestone, that is because we will be out at Snippy Con.
It's the old King family property that the Snippy incident occurred on. Now Kerry King, who is the nephew of Nellie, who was the owner of Snippy, or great nephew, I believe. Either way, he's owns this property, and he's set up this whole convention that he hosts every year, brings a lot of great names from ufology out there, and just sets up for a big kind of star party convention out on the land that the Snippy incident occurred on. And we will be on site documenting some of this. We'll be able to interview some of these presenters that we're really excited for. And we're even going to be able to bring some of these interviews back and get some of the behind the scenes Snippy Con, experience for you going there.
Yeah, which we will be able to share with you guys in some capacity. We'll figure out exactly what that's going to look like once we get closer to it. But anyway, I just want to make that distinction.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic, speaking of Snippy here, the other reported crop circle in the valley was actually one we talked about in the Snippy episode.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This one, I don't really necessarily think of it as a traditional crop circle, but it is kind of fitting the description and the common themes. It takes place on the King Ranch. And there were 15 individual circular areas found covering the area of about 300 by 150 feet in diameter. If you remember from that episode, there was a Chico bush that was flattened within about 10 inches of the ground. And inside one of these 20-inch diameter circles in the brush, that's where the mutilated corpse of Snippy was discovered.
Right, yeah.
And the U.S. Forest Service ranger was called out to check for radiation, and he reportedly found intense radiation around the circular marks. But inside the circle where the horse was found, the radiation counts dropped as he got closer to the horse's body. So that was always a big kind of weird question mystery on what happened there.
Yeah, that is super bizarre.
Yeah. So more on that. We'll probably have some ads running on the Snippy thing by the time this comes out anyways. You'll probably have a little bit more insight onto that. And we'll continue to fill you in as we lead up to that.
Oh, yeah. And also, supposedly, our bass player from Hitchhiker, John Nyberger, will be joining us. So that should be fun.
There we go. But anyways, for today, back to the crop circles. And boy, as it turns out, our mountains here in western North Carolina were producing something back in 2005 that had investigators flying in planes from Ohio and even had the infamous Linda Moulton Howe doing her own investigations for her Earth Files website. So that's pretty wild for me to think about. Like, we talk about how much weird stuff happens in western North Carolina all the time, but for it to be just its own hotbed of crop circles that I really had no idea was going on during that time period, to have someone, of the notoriety of Linda Moulton Howe coming to do her own investigation when she's already out west, kind of in the thick of her own high strangeness triangle, if you will, coming out here to check out what's going on here in 2005 is kind of an odd one to me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have my own theories about exactly what was going on, but do you happen to know if Linda was part of MUFON at that point?
I really don't know. I think this whole investigation she was doing was specifically for that Earth Files website that she's been running. So she might have been like a member of MUFON just as a, kind of extra credential for everything. But I don't think any of the reports that she was doing, I don't think she produced on MUFON's behalf.
Right.
She's kind of her own investigative journalist prior to starting Earth Files to begin with.
Yeah.
And she was she was even giving Christopher O'Brien kind of tips and tricks on the investigative journalism side stuff before he picked up his own San Luis Valley investigation. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, Linda's been in the game a long time.
Yeah. She was kind of like, she was getting to the tip of the iceberg on the cattle mutilation stuff before O'Brien just like dove in head first.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. But anyways, getting back to this whole crop circles in our backyard thing here. I was going through talking about this national database for crop circles that the ICRA runs, and North Carolina sits at 3rd in the nation for documented crop formations. And it's not like there's a ton, but there are 26 reports in the ICRA database going back to 1880, behind only Ohio with 35 and Iowa with 34. And that makes sense for those places. Like you think of cornfields, and those are in a handful of states that comes to mind first off the bat, I would say.
Yeah. I've seen some Ohio corn.
Oh, yeah.
I've ridden a horse majestically through it.
Yeah.
as weird as that is.
Have I heard the story? I feel like I might have, but I don't know.
For a time, I dated an equestrian that was from Ohio when we went up there to visit her family. I spent a lot of time on a horse there and at the Pisgah View Ranch, and I've ridden horses quite a bit. But it was funny because I was riding with her, and she's like, "All right, we're gonna go full speed," and I was like, "I am terrified, but I'm not gonna say no."
Yeah.
So the horses just start hauling ass, bro, and I'm just like flying through this cornfield, not like in the corn, just like next to it.
Yeah.
I had all my cash in my back pocket, just flies out. I have no idea where all of my money is. And I'm like, oh my God, like it could have been anywhere. We rode the horses forever. Dude, I walked back through the field and found the money somehow.
Oh, nice. All in one place.
In this green, money-colored grass, I found the damn money anyway.
When you know it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know why that is now public knowledge.
Well, now you know. If you don't know, now you know. But anyways, I would say most people probably don't have any idea that North Carolina experienced its own flap of crop circle activity, if you will.
Right.
Because I didn't.
I mean, I was at a crop circle in North Carolina and didn't realize that all of the rest of this shit happened.
Yeah. So some of the reports in just North Carolina in general actually go back older and farther than you'd expect. The ICRA list formations as far back as 1919 in an unknown location, they say. One in 1952 in Lumberton.
Of course.
Get this. Of course. Because what do we know about black triangles in Lumberton?
But that happened in the 60s, right?
It did. So
Weird. That was the precursor, bro.
Yeah, right. The in this case, the circle showed up first. Then 1953 in Asheboro, 1965 in Mount Airy, which has had its own, UFO flaps and hotspots around that time frame too. And then there was a formation in April 1979 near Pisgah Mountain. So not far from here.
Really?
That's according to the database. Yeah.
Huh. But that's a little weird with the shit that Hickson and Belton and
Off the Parkway?
saw off the Parkway.
Yeah. It's definitely, because you're not too far from it when you're going in that direction, you guys.
Right there.
Yeah, for sure. And then in the 1990s, there were documented formations across Charlotte, Asheboro, Gastonia, and then most notably here in Black Mountain in Buncombe County in June of 1994. So that 1994 kind of started off, well, I guess it was really the only main one in this area of the 90s. But then, as I mentioned, the mid-2000s is when things started to really take off around here. And you said that was the year that Warren took you out to the crop circle around here, right? 2005?
2005.
Okay.
It would have had to have been. And where was that?
So there's quite a few that popped up around here in 2005. So this is the interesting part because there were 6 different formations and they all geographically appeared in a straight line when you mapped them on a bigger scale like that.
So do you know if they were just big circles, just one singular circle?
So I'll kind of walk you through each one of them here. First one started off in June 11th of 2005. It was a series of circular grass formations that began to appear. I think this was the June 11th one. So this is June 11th is really the event that started to kick off everything here in Western North Carolina. And like I mentioned, that was the first one. But then within like weeks of that, there were these 6 other ones that popped up, spreading across like Buncombe County, Yancey County, Madison County. And like I mentioned, when the ICRA plotted them all out on a map, they all fell in this single straight line running southwest to northeast. And even more interesting, they kind of extended that line out and found that it intersected with another straight line of Ohio crop formations that were found the previous years in 2003 and 2004. So either the hoaxers were just like really, map savvy and really trying to mess with people, keeping everything on a straight line, maybe a ley line type theory, if you will. But if that really was the intended goal, it's impressive that they were able to pull that off in that way. And let's put it that.
Certainly not impossible to be able to organize that, and honestly, if that is, you just meet somebody on the internet that's like a crop circle enthusiast, as far as like the people that like get out there and do it with, like a board and a piece of rope.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
They press the stuff down with their foot. It's interesting to think that they were like, maybe they like met somebody on a forum and they started chatting about that, and they're like, well, I'm up in Ohio. It's like, I'm down here in Western North Carolina, dude. Let's do like a line and make it look like it's a planned thing. It's kind of cool.
Very well could be. I wish I could find like, if that was like some sort of forum message board to be able to like trace the whole chats that go back through there or something.
Yeah. But that sounds like it probably went through a DM.
Yeah, probably so. But either way, this first one on June 11th in 2005 took place on Green Mountain in Yancey County. So kind of out near Burnsville area. So the first one documented, at least. There was a farmer that was planting tobacco in his field until about 8:30 that night. It was a Saturday night. And he said he saw nothing out of the ordinary when he called it and went in for the evening. But then the next morning, it was known as Decoration Day, which is kind of like a local tradition of going out to clean up the cemetery graves and decorate them with flowers. And he said that when residents arrived at the cemetery, they looked up at the ridge that you could see from the cemetery, and there was a 176-foot diameter circle in mature hay on a steep hillside, perfectly swirled with a central spiral precisely located at 88 feet from center to edge along a 12 radii. No tracks or footprints were found near the circle.
Yeah. That's interesting because the one that I saw, basically the exact same description, and it was a big ass circle too.
Okay. Interesting. So the CPRI investigator, Tom Ginter, drove up to Asheville to be the first kind of on the site to investigate. And he said that he found some node lengthening in the samples, but nothing dramatic on the electromagnetic readings. And his overall assessment, he was quoted saying, "I would have to ask why someone would hoax in one location where almost no one would see it. But I don't know. That seems like a lot of people saw it when they were going out to decorate for Decoration Day. So that's a odd little bit of a quote too." And when he's talking about the node lengthening, I'll go into the little scientific explanation of that a little bit later when we go into like how some of these crop circles are made. But that's essentially one of the byproducts that is happening as these crops are being bent. The nodes are lengthening instead of them breaking down. So it's just kind of a common thing that they're checking for when these crop circle investigators are going out to see if this is something that was obviously hoaxed or if it's something that makes them scratch their head a little more.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, there were photographs taken by a local resident at dusk the following evening. There were storm clouds gathering, but no rain in the area. And the camera flash was apparently not discharged at all. But this photo that the resident took showed multiple orbs that could not be explained as moisture droplets that were reflecting what appeared to be a flashlight, but the flash was not on. So, interesting little tidbit of the orbs showing up here with that. You know, that orbs kind of lump into the whole UFO thing, if you haven't picked up on that from a lot of the reports that kind of go on. But anyways, there was a second formation that was found in a dumbbell pattern. It was about like two 20-foot circles connected by a single path. And it appeared about a mile away from that original circle that we just talked about, and just like an extremely remote holler around the same time frame. But it was apparently destroyed before it could be photographed, allegedly. Don't know why you would find that and destroy it, but maybe someone really freaked out and was scared by it.
That they didn't want the attention.
Yeah, that too. Maybe so. So the next one, this hit is taking place here in Buncombe County. This one was on June 21st, so 10 days after that one over in Yancey County took place. This was over in Leicester area. I guess it depends how you want to say that. Leicester. If you're a local, it's Leicester, but
Leicestershire sauce.
Yeah. So this is the formation that brought Linda to Western North Carolina, and this is kind of known as the big one, if you will. So on the night of June 21st, more than a dozen witnesses spread across a 10-mile radius reported seeing a blinding white light lasting several seconds at around 11:15 p.m. Reportedly, animals all across that radius just went berserk at the same time. The landowners this took place on, his dog was locked in the basement and allegedly tried to rip the door off. And another dog upstairs also completely lost it. But no unusual weather was occurring. It had not rained. They said it had been basically in a drought for 7 to 10 days. But the next morning, 4 circle formations were found in 6 to 7 foot hay. The main central circle was approximately 60 to 75 feet in diameter with a double S-shaped swirl inside of it. And that's kind of a pattern that the ICRA investigators said that they had never encountered in any other formation in their records at the time, at least. And 3 smaller circles between 10 to 19 feet across were placed in a triangle pattern near the main circle.
Damn.
Yeah.
This is interesting because I'm like, okay, where in Leicester was this shit?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, probably private land here because it just says the landowner's son was the first one to find it. He reported, this is interesting here, the area smelled like a campfire that had just been put out. And when he walked into the 3 smaller circles area that had the triangle shape, he said the centers of all those were burned, both the plants and the soil. And he did photograph this. But by the time that ICRA arrived 9 days later, 7 inches of rain had come through and mostly, washed away any bit of evidence that they were able to document or take back with them for their reports. But even past that, the 7 days they came in, they did find trace evidence of burned stems that were still found for them to sample. And, typically burning in these crop formations and circles isn't really a commonly reported element of that.
Not at all.
So that kind of threw a bit of a wrench in the case there.
Can I throw something out there?
Yeah.
Do you remember the story? And I believe that they covered this on one of the newer episodes of Unsolved Mysteries, but there were some people, I think that they were camping on one of the Great Lakes, and in the middle of the night, I think it was a couple, they woke up and they heard this kind of like whooshing, really loud noise, and they walked outside of the tent and looked up, and there was a UFO hovering over the lake, sucking water up.
Oh, yeah.
Sucking water up in a tornado-like fashion. Yeah, like a funnel.
Yeah. I did. I can't remember what this was on, but I definitely have heard this story before.
Yeah, just saying.
Yeah.
Maybe they were sucking some wheat up in. Maybe it's like Mr. Fusion. It's like Mr. Fusion from Back to the Future. You can put any sort of biodegradable matter in there and it'll run the fucker.
Yeah, maybe so. So these investigators, they tested it. It's something called L-neat positive, which is something they used to test for node elongation. It's kind of just a biophysical test that they use to kind of tell these anomalous plant effects that happen when certain situations like this come up. And ICRA also placed a Geiger counter in the main circle and measured elevated levels of radioactivity, approximately twice normal baseline levels, and they monitored that continuously over the next 2 days, and those levels remained until they faded on the third one.
This one was in 2005 as well?
2005. This was the Leicester one.
That is so bizarre to me, dude.
Yeah. No tracks leading into this isolated area. It was a gated field, so private property, private land, and no evidence of any foul play, if you will, was ever found on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really weird, though, with the burnt stuff. I've almost never heard of that. I've heard of UFO landing spots where people said they saw UFOs land where there were scorch marks and things like that, which, depending on how you think about things, that could have been experimental, military vehicles, things like that, things that were, burning fuels or had combustion engines, but never in a crop circle situation.
Yeah. And this is also interesting because this element pops up again here because the landowners said they had seen unexplained lights and balls of light in that valley on at least 2 previous occasions. And they just refused to go to local media about press coverage for this because the Green Mountain incident that had happened 10 days before, and Jeff Wilson, the ICRA investigator's words, he said that it had done a pretty good ridicule job of it. So basically they saw these people over in Green Mountain reported theirs, and they're getting just like laughed out of town. So they're like, we're going to leave this one alone. This is kind of weird, and we don't want the media publicity on this one.
Well, that makes sense why I never heard of it.
Yeah, that could be a good case on it. I mean, obviously the people over at ICRA are probably going with a fine-tooth comb on some of this stuff to find these reports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. It's made its way there. And obviously they had a boots-on-the-ground investigator that was the contact there. So that's probably the main reason this one got brought to light, if we're being honest.
Man, that is so wild to think about, that like right around the time that I was seeing this thing, there was like this actually weird one that was kind of under wraps going on even closer to home.
Yeah.
That is so crazy.
So get this, just up the road, a triangular shaped ryegrass field was also found flattened in the same shape as the triangular field itself, apparently occurring on the same night as the one. And then 2 weeks later, still in Leicester, roughly a square area of knee-high corn across the street was found pressed so hard into the soil it was described as impacted. And both secondary formations also fell into this straight line pattern.
All right.
You said yours was a cornfield, right?
I mean, I'm pretty damn sure it was corn. Maybe it was, I don't know. It's hard to tell because, again,
you're good. Yeah.
This was a long-ass time ago. There's a chance that it wasn't corn, that it was just some kind of wheat field or something like that. So
okay, well, this one is the one that I've kind of think it might be because you alluded to Madison County, kind of sounded familiar, right? Mm-hmm. This one occurred in the Jupiter area of Madison County, also June 21st, 2005. So the same exact day that one that was going on in Leicester popped up, this one popped up in the Jupiter area in Madison County.
Yeah, and it was definitely warm weather when it happened. So
okay, yeah, I mean this all checks out. This one was apparently in the shape of just a 57-foot circular, just like a ellipses shape, swirled clockwise with one anomalous counterclockwise section in the lower left quadrant. Does that sound familiar at all?
I mean, by and large, the shape checks out.
Okay. So this is, from what I could tell, I think from just comparing our notes, this one seems like it's probably the most likely one you visited.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we spoke to the older gentleman that owned the property, and it was kind of interesting because when we asked him what he thought it was, he said, and this is kind of odd, but he said it was a mini cyclone.
That's very interesting considering what you just previously alluded to there.
Yeah, I know. And it's weird because I wasn't even really thinking about that when I was remembering how he had described it. But me and Josh, we kind of looked at each other when he said a mini cyclone, and we're like, we didn't say this to him. We were like, oh, okay, sure, what, okay. But, when we got in the car, we were both kind of thinking, I mean, a mini cyclone isn't necessarily going to leave a perfect circular shape there.
Yeah, that's a degree of control that those do not typically exhibit.
Unless they're coming off the ass of a UFO.
Yeah. So this took place in the Eller Creek area. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you at all.
For some reason it's not. But
very rural area that there's like no houses in visual range. It's just kind of like out in the country.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely in the country. I mean, if there was a house, you were kind of hard-pressed to see it.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's what the description kind of means there. There's another interesting element on this, and let me know if this rings a bell. What appeared to be four-wheeler tracks leading into and out of the formation had been, inconsistent widths and spacing on measurements, and they appeared to peter out in the middle of the field with nowhere to go. And apparently the formation was then tested for this L-neat positive and they were tested L-neat positive for that node elongation kind of phenomenon that was occurring with some of these other ones.
Yeah.
So another one that was kind of left with people scratching their head. And then we've got another one, again, in Burnsville, Yancey County area. This one happened in late June or early July 2005. I don't have an exact date on their database here. But this one was actually discovered from the air while flying in that straight line connecting the formations. I guess one of the ICRA investigators was starting to put these patterns together, and they were flying over this line formation, just seeing if there was anything else they could spot from the air. And they noticed a 110-foot diameter ring with a 22-foot central swirled circle connected by a straight path on what was just this 45 to 50 degree, really steep slope. So if you are hoaxing, not an area that's going to be easy to do that on just because of the geography.
Yeah, the one I saw was definitely on a hill, and it was not too far away from the homestead of the person that owned the land.
Okay, interesting. So this one was also notable because the formation had flattened a bunch of blackberry bushes in the middle of the ring, but while the bushes were flattened, not a single berry was damaged. They were all intact. And Jeff Wilson, the ICRA investigator, said, it wasn't as if someone flattened this with a garden roller because that would have left clear damage on these fragile berries. This was something else entirely. Yeah. And then the landowner for this one didn't even know the formation was there until ICRA showed up, and they're like, hey, I was just flying over your land and I saw this weird thing. Can I go check it out? And no footprints or hoaxing marks were found, but elevated radiation readings were also measured here, similar levels to the incident there was over in Leicester. And again, tested LNEAT positive for that node elongation thing. And then again, this is kind of the last one from this 2005 flap, another Mars Hill one out in Madison County. This one was spotted by a plane again along that same kind of alignment flight, approximately 20 feet in diameter and in the hay that was already harvested, but no further investigation was possible on that because it was on private land.
Right. Weird.
So pretty interesting whole, collection of experiences that happened basically over a 1 month span in the summer of 2005.
If I had to guess if anyone was the one that I went and saw, it would be the one that you were suspecting there. I genuinely do wish that I remembered more about it, but it was a pretty quick thing. I mean, Maura and I got in the car, drove out there, looked at it, took a couple of pictures, talked to the guy a little bit, and that was about it.
Well, here's the thing. The one you went to might not have even been included in this, which would be like, what would further kind of add evidence to this flap of 2005, because these are the ones that reported directly to this ICRA organization. Maybe this person just got Josh's number and they called him instead. They might not even known to call these people.
That's true. I need to hit up Warren and just see if he remembers. I'm sure he remembers more of the details because, his brain is steel trap. But
yeah. Well, speaking of Warren, what's also kind of interesting and what comes to mind is when we talked to him, I kind of asked, what's kind of an interesting investigative thread we could follow on some of the stuff around Western North Carolina that might not have been fully explored. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, there's the school of thought of when you map out all these paranormal hotspots and you draw a line, there's a thread connecting them. Yep. And damn if that isn't exactly what's going on here in this flap situation.
Yeah.
So it's an odd bit of a coincidence on that one. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of weird things. And like I said, I'm not sitting here saying I buy all of this because I came into this episode extremely skeptical. I thought the crop circles were completely bullshit, if I'm being honest with you. And there's some weird things in some of this that have just made me kind of maybe not reconsider, but at least just kind of like, that's an odd element. And I think some of the things like the blinding light that was witnessed by all these people on the same night, these orb things that are showing up, it's wild because when speaking to Linda Moulton Howe, Jeffrey Wilson, the ICRA director, he told her that the evidence is pretty clear and convincing and documented that not all crop circles are being mechanically made by people. There's this large population of crop circles out there that have enough evidence that shows the typical hoaxing methods just cannot produce the kinds of things we're seeing. And I mean, if he's the expert on that, I'll take his word for it. But damn, it's just wild to me that North Carolina was the number one state in the U.S. for crop formations in the year 2005. And that's the only year they held that ranking, but they had some weird shit going on, I guess.
Take that, Beer City.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's insane to me, and it's also insane to me that we have consistently been number 3 in the country.
Yeah, that's an ongoing record, I guess. There was one that showed up in 2007, a couple years after the flap, and this was kind of a very different situation here. This one took place in West Asheville in late May of 2007. A 100-foot interlocking circle formation appeared on a hayfield near the intersection of Huffman and Oak Crest Drives over in West Asheville. So like right in the city. And I guess the property owner that owned the land this was on, he was deceased at the time, but nearby resident told a reporter that he'd seen bright lights overhead Saturday night and initially assumed that it was a plane. But after seeing the formation, he was interviewed saying, "I don't know. This is a freak city after all." So I thought that was a funny quote. And then I guess Asheville police captain at the time, Tim Splain, he was trying to have a sense of humor on this, but it comes across kind of weird when you're reading his quotes in an old article. And it says, "With all that detail, it would probably have to be some kind of extraterrestrial intervention. It absolutely could not be human." But then he kind of like goes on later to add to say that most crop circles have been debunked as man-made. So I think he was like trying to make a joke, and then the reporters are just like, "Oh, I'm going to run with this."
Yeah, probably just being facetious.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's it's kind of an interesting one on that. But then Lindy Tucker, who was a Fairview resident, and she was the local representative at the time, she investigated that one afternoon, and her kind of conclusion that she reached was probably human. We took some electromagnetic readings and plant samples, but it didn't look very promising. We found evidence of a lot of broken grass there. Broken stems are the classic indicator of mechanical hoaxing. Stomping board snap stalks rather than heat bending the nodes. Tucker noted that she hadn't filed the final report, but it wasn't looking promising for extraterrestrials.
That is probably more than likely true, but I will still point out that, you know, the bro had talked to multiple people that had called into his show back the day when he was doing the Gralien report that talked about living in Fairview. It's called Fairview for a reason. You got a fair view out there. And dude, tons of TR-3B style, very large black triangle craft have been seen in Fairview since I think around the 80s. So
yeah, that's wild to think of.
If you want to, you know, tenuously tie those two things together. But I have to say that when you're describing things like, you know, these big bright lights that people are seeing and strange animal behavior, it does kind of make you start to look at the whole situation and be like, okay, you know, like you were saying, maybe there is a little something more to it, because I'm right there with you. As soon as I started seeing videos in the 90s of guys going out there with a board with a rope and they would push them down, I was like, case closed.
Yeah.
And look, I'm still probably going to be leaning more towards that this was people doing this stuff. But the one that you were talking about with the burn part and the irregular patterns in the circles themselves, I thought that was really interesting and kind of a standout point because, again, a vast majority of the circular formations are all going to be going in an either clockwise or counterclockwise swirl.
Yeah, when they're being pressed into that same that same direction. Yeah. And like this is a great example of why ICRA doesn't just automatically dismiss these things until it gets out there. They're looking for things like exactly what you're saying. They're looking for these node elongation signs as opposed to them being mechanically pressed down, physically pressed down.
And good on them, because what other organization have you ever heard that went to that kind of meticulous reasoning?
I didn't even know ICRA existed until today, so good for them,
Yeah,
honestly.
good for them. That's kick-ass. That's good field work, damn it.
Yeah, because you think about it, it would be bad science to ignore an anomaly like this and just completely write it off as a hoax without sending it through the proper scientific process. So an independent organization is the one that has to pick up the slack and do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to get out there and fuck up a blueberry bush for the sake of science, but I am kind of interested in this whole idea because if you think about it, like, that probably would be rather difficult to push down.
Yeah.
Was it a blue or a blackberry bush? I think it was blackberry.
Yeah, I think it was blackberry.
I mean, still, to not squish any of the fruit, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. That, especially for the bush to be flattened itself, but the fruit to be all intact.
And also the description of some of the vegetation being borderline impacted.
Yeah,
that's a pretty serious force. That's not a foot in a board.
Yeah. If it's impacted, you've got some force behind that.
It's like my brother Johnny's got a steamroller. We like to drive it around and somehow leaves no trace getting in there.
That's the interesting one. So yeah, all the Western North Carolina stuff is, it is a good, just kind of, I mean, this might be a decently long one because that's probably kind of just like the tip of the iceberg on a lot of this, because I do want to back up and kind of go back into the origins of how this kind of became a phenomenon to begin with.
Yeah.
But to put this weird bit of culture in context. So, before these modern stories, kind of to back up into the pre-crop circle era, when they were kind of more known as the saucer nests, if you will, we did kind of see a lot of the common threads starting to pop up. And like I said, the history of this really begins in Wiltshire, England, which is the home of Stonehenge. So it's dotted with ancient burial mounds and standing stones, and even the famous white horse figures that are carved into the chalk hillsides there. So there's a researcher named Jeremy Northcote, and he made an interesting point saying the people of this region have a 5,000-year documented history of making enormous, elaborate patterns in their landscape. So whether to connect this to crop circles or just a bit of a coincidence, he kind of leaves open for everyone to decide, but he's just trying to allude to like some of the inspiration for, these elaborate patterns and shapes that are seen from above can kind of be found early on in some of these formations that are already there in the Wiltshire area.
Oh, wild.
So the first kind of earliest reference documented in a crop circle, at least as the crop circle culture likes to cite, is something called the mowing devil. And this is actually cited in an English pamphlet from Hertfordshire. There was a farmer that refused to pay a laborer a fair wage to cut his oat field, and the farmer supposedly declared he'd rather have the devil do the work. That night, the field appeared to be on fire. In the morning, the oats were cut perfectly in a perfect circular pattern, and the pamphlet that kind of documents all this includes an image of a devil with a scythe mowing a circular field. And skeptics kind of note that the stalks were cut, not bent, so technically different. But again, this image has kind of become iconic in crop circle lore for being the first mysterious paranormal crop circle, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I guess our first mysterious paranormal crop circle is the Devil's Tramping Ground.
Yeah, I guess
It's not really in crops, but
it's a circle. It's a land circle.
Yeah.
There was another in 1880 in Nature Journal. Amateur scientist John Rand Capron wrote a letter to the prestigious journal describing a circular patch of flattened wheat in a Surrey field after a violent storm, suggesting cyclonic wind action. And this serves as the oldest documented scientific observation of something resembling a crop circle.
There's that cyclone again.
Yep. Again, popping up all over the place. In 1966, the Tully saucer nest in Australia. This is, again, going back to that saucer nest categorization here, but there was a banana farmer named George Pedley who was driving a tractor on his neighbor Albert Pinnacy's property near Horseshoe Lagoon, which is near Tully, Queensland, when he claimed to watch a saucer-shaped craft rise from the swampy lagoon, fly away, leaving a 30-foot circle in the flattened reeds. Authorities investigated and attributed it to natural causes. A willy-willy or waterspout. I don't know what the fuck a willy-willy is. But.
And it's even more unfortunate that the guy's name is Panisi. And they're talking about willies.
Right.
With a waterspout.
Either way, this story kind of just refused to die, and it actually directly inspired a man named Doug Bauer. A little bit more on him later, but it inspired some events that took place a decade later. But either way, by the late 1960s and early 1970s, the UFO craze is just in full swing in the UK, in Wiltshire, and that whole kind of surrounding area has just become the center for just skywatch culture. There were rumors of saucer nests, but none were ever photographed. Honestly, like the whole entire pre-1978 crop circle record is just kind of fuzzy at best. It's going off word of mouth and documented causes. There's no photographic records until around 1978, I guess.
Yeah.
And that kind of takes you back, as I mentioned, the Doug Bauer character. In 1976, there were two picture framing artists and pub buddies that they lived in Southampton. One was named Doug Bauer, and the other was named Dave Chorley. And they were just, having a drink in the pub. And Dave brought up this whole Tully saucer nest thing he'd heard about when he was over living in Melbourne or doing some type of job before returning over to England in 1968. And he turned to his buddy Dave and essentially said, like, let's do that ourselves. And, the circles that the pairs were making for fun kind of just went completely unnoticed for years. Like, they'd figured out the whole method to do this, and they were sitting here trying to lay these traps for people, and no one was finding them. They were either getting washed away by the time anyone's getting out to the area, or no one thought they were impressive or weird enough to do anything about it. But it wasn't until Bauer chose a location at a place called Cheesefoot Head, a scenic viewpoint that was popular with tourists, that the circles finally made the news. And they worked under the cover of darkness with, like you mentioned, planks of wood, ropes. They used a baseball cap fitted with a wire loop, and Doug used this as a level to walk in a straight line. And that was basically their entire toolkit that they had.
That makes sense. So they would put a stake in the middle, and that would connect to their ball cap.
Yeah.
And then they would know, like,
Where
because
to-
of that's really funny.
Yeah. So that was their whole, that's all they needed to pull these things off. And I guess they had a lot of practice before people started to pick up on it. So they'd probably perfected their craft to look pretty convincing by the time people started to really notice. But like I said, eventually one of the circles was spotted, and the media picked it up, and the UFO community just descended onto Wiltshire. They already had their reputation. Now the crop circles are popping up. And Doug just later admitted, like, oh, we had a hell of a laugh watching all this happen.
I bet.
And what finally made them come forward in 1991 was a news report that researcher Terence Maiden was petitioning the British government for funding to study these circles. And they didn't want taxpayer money wasted on a prank. So they confessed to journalist Graham Burrow with the Today newspaper for a reported 10,000 euro. I guess, I don't know if he paid them for the story or what that happened. But anyways, the whole headline was "The Men Who Conned the World." And to prove that they were the ones who did it, they took these journalists out and they made a crop circle in front of them. They brought in this guy named Pat Delago, who was a co-author of this best-selling book called Circular Evidence, which was just all about crop circles. Apparently it was like the hit reading at the time. It was on the Queen's summer reading list. But Doug, who was 67 at the time, and Dave was 62, they went out, showed all these crop circle experts how they'd been pulling it off, and Pat basically examined it and declared that it was authentic. And they told him that we just made this. We have a whole tape of showing how we documented our process all along the way. But I thought that was kind of a whole funny thing, because this is really around the time that things start to kind of spiral up in the mainstream sense of crop circles. But here's the twist, is that Doug and Dave claim to be responsible for all the circles made before 1987 and for more than 200 circles between 1978 and 1991, which is a shit ton of circles to be making. That's crazy work, especially since some of these probably allegedly went unfound. But here's the thing. In 1991 alone, nearly 1,000 crop circles appeared in England, and their confession even acknowledged that about 1,000 crop circles that have been popped up in the mainstream news were not made by them. So, like, the confession didn't necessarily kill the phenomenon, but it kind of added fuel to the fire there. Because after 1991, through probably the copycat effect, maybe something else, I don't know. But either way, crop circles started appearing all over the world. And there are some inconsistencies in Doug and Dave's story. They couldn't agree on when or where they made their very first crop circle. They've given kind of different accounts in different interviews. And some people who are like true believers in the crop circles, that are like, oh, they can't even tell you when this happened. These men are unreliable. But let's be real. Like, it's two elderly men trying to remember nights sneaking around when they've done this over 200 times. Like, details are going to get a little blurred, I would imagine.
Yeah. Number one, I really appreciate the fact that they were trying to spare the taxpayer dollars. Secondarily, it'd be funny. It's like all of these crop circles just pop up in radius to different bars, because it's like for every two of them, there's another bar with two other drunk guys that are like, hey, you know what? It'd be really fun to make these fucking crop circles. Hey, I'm drunk enough to make one. Let's do it.
So, I mean, regardless of Doug and Dave's adventures, the numbers really kind of tell the full story here, which puts into perspective, yeah, they were making a bunch of circles, but let's put it this way. 112 crop circles were reported in the UK in 1988, 305 in 1989, almost 1,000 in 1990. And post-confession of Doug and Dave, there were circles appearing in over 50 countries worldwide. And by 2001, approximately 10,000 crop circles had been reported internationally.
Damn.
Kind of a, it's interesting. I could go a lot of different ways with that. I think the copycat effect really kind of is the most likely explanation for what's going on here. But I think you could argue that, like, that's a lot of crop circles to be popping up for this many people to have that much free time and interest in joining in on the hoax, if you will. But who knows?
Kind of makes sense, though. There wasn't as much stuff to do. There wasn't as much inside entertainment back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, too, that we had mentioned before, I think maybe on one of the episodes of the Midnight Broadcast that's interesting in regards to the crop circle phenomenon was, and maybe you're going to get to this, but there was this really, really convincing computer-generated hoax that was going around for a good long while, I believe in the 90s, that depicted a UFO flying over a cornfield and this thing etching out kind of like a printer showing below. And I have to say, for its time, that hoax was so convincingly well made that was like the smoking gun for a lot of people for the longest time. So on top of this cultural phenomenon of people, maybe just all kind of hearing that this was a thing to do and people that like to mess with other people, you had this added fuel on the fire where you had this really well made, especially for the time, hoax that was really propagating this idea that UFOs and extraterrestrials were responsible for this thing. However, that hoax was outed by its own creator years down the road where they showed exactly how they created it. But again, as far as looking at it from just a straight cultural phenomenon kind of thing, you really did have kind of this weird perfect storm of people really looking at this like, holy shit, this is aliens.
Yeah, and I think it did kind of spark a bit of, it caught on with people who were maybe more creative, maybe artistic in that sense, because outside of just even the paranormal capacity, it did catch on in kind of like an artful craft kind of way, because in 1992, there was a formal crop circle making competition that was held in Berkshire with a €3,000 prize that was partly funded by the Arthur Koester Foundation. But the winning team was actually comprised of 3 Westland helicopter engineers. They made this using rope, PVC pipe, a plank, string, and some sort of telescopic device and 2 step ladders. And the whole idea behind this competition was basically to show that humans are capable of producing these authentic crop circles. And just because what is considered authentic by ICRA standards doesn't mean it can't be replicated on a human scale by people that are coming at this from a very tactical, artistic sense.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, when you think about the scale and the intricacy of some of these crop circles, dude, it is like, I have seen some pictures of some from back in the day that are absolutely like eighth wonder of the world complicated. And I would assume that these are all people that made these, but it's really impressive work. I would like to say, though, I have this vision of, the sidelines of this crop circle competition, and there's just one farmer standing on the sideline, just tears streaming, single
He
tears.
lost all his crops.
He's like, what are they doing with all this wheat?
So kind of adding on to this becoming a bit of an art form, there were corporations that were hiring these crop circle artists to make advertisements for them at the time. Like Nike, Korn, the band with a K.
There you go.
Supreme, which was like this massive like box logo company in California. And even the 2012 London Olympics, they were hiring these cornfield crop circle artists to basically put their logos in some sort of crop field and be able to get a drone or overhead photograph and use that for advertising purposes.
I'm assuming once they've made these depressions, you can then harvest the stuff.
So you're not completely just wasting a bunch of, I mean, hope so.
That's a lot of water and fertilizer or whatever the hell they do.
Yeah. So here's the thing. There's a few artists that are kind of common for this, being hired by corporations to do this. Rod Dixon and John Lundberg are the 2 kind of main ones that these corporations were hiring, specifically like Nike and Korn. And here's kind of the interesting, strange part is both of these guys, Dixon and Lundberg, have reported seeing unexplained aerial phenomenon, what might be categorized as UFOs, while they've been working on the fields making these circles. So it's like the people creating the hoaxes are also seeing these strange lights.
The aliens are like, what the hell are they doing?
Let's check this shit out. Yeah, I think that's kind of maybe they're just enriching the lore a little bit, adding a flair to it.
Probably.
But it seems that's kind of a common thing that's been reported around a lot of the people that have been making these structures themselves, reported being observed by something else.
Turns out Banksy got his start in corn.
So there's a few kind of scientific sides to this, to ways to look at it. And it goes into what I've kind of talked about before with some of the elongated node stuff. But there's biophysicist William Levengood, who published 2 papers in a peer-reviewed journal in 1994 and 1999. And his argument basically is that plants inside genuine crop circles show measurable physical differences from outside plants, specifically the node elongation or the small holes blown through them, which he called expulsion cavities. And his theory is that intense, rapid microwave radiation heated water inside plant cells, expanding the steam and blowing tiny holes outward. Exactly what happens if you put a plant in a microwave for 20 to 30 seconds. And he proposed that the source was a spinning plasma vortex.
Potentially so, but it would make me think that there might be some man-made mechanism or means to be able to heat up an area without leaving burns that would essentially be able to produce the same effect.
Yeah, like a microwave.
Yeah, and have some sort of situation that it was aiding the plants in being able to lay down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how you would do that, but I mean, come on, we can heat up all kinds of weird stuff that put out all kinds of different weird like signatures like that. I'm not saying they're walking around with an extension cable and an open microwave, but
yeah. And what you're alluded to is kind of where this whole scientific debate just gets messy, because there are skeptics that kind of published a rebuttal paper just challenging his whole methodology and everything he's doing. But this is where it kind of gets into the whole back and forth on scientific debates on some of the topics. Basically saying that the node measurements that were produced, they couldn't be reproduced by any sort of man-made control, but that was never like conclusively explained in anything else. So everything else is just kind of left inconclusive. Neither side never fully proved anything, and the science here is just kind of left unresolved, if you will. But like you said, I think there's plenty of opportunities to revisit this subject and go back to, maybe the scientific community has already felt they've reached the conclusion on this and they don't need to further explore that. But, some of the interesting stuff we've dug into this evening kind of shows that there's a little more than I initially thought on this one. And the other weird part is the orbs, honestly, because the multiple credible witnesses, including like the people making these circles themselves, have reported seeing balls of light near the formations. And I guess the most famous video, like you mentioned, is the Oliver's Castle footage from 1996, which appeared to show these 2 glowing orbs that were kind of circling over a crop circle, forming beneath them in real time. But that one is the one you alluded to being turned out to be a digital hoax.
Damn good one.
Cameraman just eventually confessed on that. But I guess the other footnote on that is, even after debunking, experienced crop circles kept reporting these anomalous lights that were out while they were working on them. People that were sitting here, hoaxing them, trying to get a good laugh, were experiencing things that they couldn't explain at the same time. So that was kind of the weird take on this.
Well, it's funny if you think about that from the outside perspective, as in from the alien perspective. Maybe they would look at it and be like, well, that's not a language we've seen them write.
Right, yeah.
Right in before. Are they trying to signal us? These are huge. They're obviously for sky-bearing
like
witnesses.
The Nazca lines, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of funny.
It really is. There's a whole nother frame of this, because we've talked about so much. Everything we've talked about today is either a hoax or a UFO. And that's like the two opposite ends of the spectrum, but like where are the other options in this? And this is one that I found today. It's the spiritual scientific framework reference. And this one doesn't really get much attention because it doesn't kind of fall into those 2 categories. But this is a Mumbai-based organization, and they apply what they call spiritual research to paranormal phenomena. So take that for what you will, a little bit metaphysical. This probably gets into what some people might consider the woo side of things here. But their methodology explicitly bypasses just conventional science, and they describe it, or these circles or these formations, I guess I should say, as a knowledge received through the elevated spiritual perception of advanced practitioners. So whether you accept that methodology or not, their conclusions are, unlike anything else you're going to find on this topic. According to them, crop circles are not man-made, but created by subtle entities from the spiritual dimension, beings that exist after death in either positive or negative subtle realms. The designs are formed in the shape of sacred geometric diagrams of Hindu tradition used to transmit spiritual energy, while negative formations are created by entities they call mantrics, or subtle sorcerers inhabiting what they describe as the second region of hell after death. Positive formations come from lower-level spiritually positive entities in the subtle region of the lower heaven, and higher-order spiritual beings don't bother with physical manifestations because they could influence Earth through their thought alone. So, definitely gets into some metaphysical connotations there.
They're made by the little guy that Stephen Greer hangs out with.
When you think about it, this reference or frame of mind or way of thinking about it can be applied to the UFO topic all the same. And they don't have to be, exclusive from one another necessarily. But, it's kind of an interesting thing because they go on to say that when the grain is pressed down to form a circle, it is then harvested and eaten by the people. And the positive or negative energy, depending on who made that design, is then embedded in the people who consume it. So the circle isn't just visual, it's like a delivery mechanism for energy.
Word to the wise, don't eat the negatively ionized corn.
I think if I found a crop circle, I would not be eating, consuming any of that, but
Well, especially if you have a little bit of base knowledge about the UFO phenomenon, because
radiation.
Well, exactly. When you hear about people coming away from potential UFO encounters with radiation burns, I'm not eating that corn. And also, it's funny that not a lot of the corn is popped when you get there. If that's the case. It's a funny thing to say, but it's an interesting question.
That is kind of a funny way to look at it. But yeah, whether you find this like kind of, little on the woo side, whether you think this is credible and checks out or kind of somewhere in between, it does connect to something that's, kind of a common thing we've seen along the way here. And something that's probably even older than this. And it's the idea that spiritual forces leave their mark on the ground and that, I guess, some way of consuming these marks just transmits these forces. And I guess it is kind of, something that you've seen through folklore for a long time, harvest rituals, sacred bread. See that in religion a little bit. It's just kind of like drawing on this deep-rooted archetype that consistently appears across folklore is the best way to put it. And, take it for what you will, but it's an interesting way to think about it comparative to it's only hoaxers or it's only UFOs.
Yeah. I think there's I don't know at this point, it's very strange when you bring up some of these things about shit that's happened in our backyard that I never even really knew.
Yeah.
I obviously knew that there was some of that activity going on, but I never paid it really any attention outside of the idea that it was probably just some teenagers that had nothing better to do. And they did a pretty convincing crop circle. But when you look at some of the subsequent reports of the things that are going on around the same time, the strange orbs and lights that are being seen around these things forming, if nothing else, it adds another layer to the thing where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe there is a little bit more to this whole thing than we think. But then again, when you look at it strictly under the lens of either cultural phenomenon or potentially aliens, I still think it's very interesting, if nothing else, from a cultural standpoint. But I do like posing the question like, okay, there's two classes of thought there. Is there something else to it? I still think that it's wild when people kind of flock to something that is maybe, sort of seated in paranormal, but always it kind of ends up, or at least in this case, ends up being this weird cultural extension of artistic expression.
Yeah.
And maybe some of these people were actually going into it being like, I don't know, maybe we would be able to signal the aliens by doing some wild shit like this.
Maybe so. And I think what's eye-opening for me is I didn't realize what a subculture there is around this to this day.
Yeah.
Not only from the investigative sense, like the people that do this as hobbyists, making these for companies, making these for their own artistic endeavors, what have you. Like, it's kind of funny. I started looking into this, and the community calls themselves, or they refer to themselves as croppies.
Oh, sweet.
Which I thought is like the coolest nickname for crop circle enthusiasts.
Yeah,
and
that's funny.
I found there's a quote by Colin Andrews, who's kind of seen as the prominent croppie, if you will. He's kind of a leading crop circle researcher in the modern era. And he basically argues that 80% of crop circles were man-made. And he says about 20% possibly fall under natural explanations or even unknown explanations. And he, said after the 1991 confessions of Dave and Doug there, he's still stuck with this kind of breakdown that he had on this theory. And he says he believed that even human circle makers were being prompted by an independent, non-human mind. And he told the Seattle Times in 2002 that he remains more convinced than ever that there are non-human causes at play here. And that's really interesting to me because this is a theory that I've seen our buddy Alan Greenfield kind of allude to multiple times here, is that this whole trickster element, this whole hoaxer mindset, it comes from somewhere else because these people aren't naturally going to be inspired to go out and do something without some sort of influence coming from some sort of other place. And I'll just leave it at that. And that's kind of what Colin Andrews is alluding to in the crop circle, hoaxing, prompted by an independent non-human mind theory is kind of poking at there.
Certainly so. I think, though, that human beings have a little bit of some of us have an innate kind of thrill seeker thing about us.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that when a teenager goes out into the middle of the night to somebody else's property with their friends and they try to make a crop circle or something like that. I mean, dude, it's 100% giving them the dopamine that a thrill seeker would.
Sure.
The whole idea, like, holy shit, we might get caught, we might get shot at, who knows? Humans are also slightly inherently mischievous.
Yeah. I guess the whole thing is just like being able to, this many people being able to pull it off convincingly too. Because it's one thing to go out there with your buddies, like, yeah, we're going to pull off a crop circle, and like without any proper measuring tools to do this with, like, you're probably just going to make a bunch of weird looking indentions in the ground and be like, I think this looks good, right?
Yeah, did half of America get on a forum where they all got the memo about the hat with the wire on it?
Yeah, see, that's what I'm getting at. Like, there has to be like a method that was getting shared across message boards, secret underground communities, whatever, if this whole hoaxer movement took place. And obviously it did, because even the professionals are chalking 80% up to hoaxes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
kind of an interesting thing. But I mean, yeah, let's be real. The overwhelming majority of crop circles are human made. And like, that's not a dispute at all. Like we said, the professionals are even saying that, but Doug and Dave definitely started that trend. But, thousands of artists and just pranksters and commercial contractors have really kind of continued that. And it's kind of just become, its own cultural phenomenon, even outside of the paranormal realm in a way.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, I suppose that brings our circle to a close.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I don't really have anything else that's gonna further, add to the argument or anything else here. I think there's a lot of examples we could give, but I think we've kind of covered a pretty big breadth of the whole crop circle phenomenon, not just as a whole, but specifically here in Western North Carolina too.
Yeah, man. Well, as always, you've done incredible research on this thing. When we came up with the idea to maybe do an episode about the crop circle things, we're like, oh yeah, I mean, like, well, I know that there was one here, so at least we have that, and then we can kind of look into maybe if anything else has happened in North Carolina. And as we kind of always find out on this podcast, well, there's a reason that we ended up doing this damn thing, because lo and behold, North Carolina, number 3 state in the country with the most crop circle activity. So
yeah,
of course.
Right. Because we talk about, we've got it all here. I never thought we'd be cracking the top anything for crop circles, and here we are.
Of course. Well, excellent work as always. But now it goes to you, the listeners. We want to know if you yourself have gone out there and made one of these things with the intention potentially of contacting the aliens, or if you were ever anywhere in the country, really, and you happen to be listening to the podcast and you experienced a crop circle in your town, or hell, maybe even on your property, and you don't quite know exactly the origin of it, if it's still mysterious, we would love to hear all about it. And you can write us at ghostsinthemountains@gmail.com and share with us your story about some sort of wild crop circle and or crop circle adjacent story. But hey, it doesn't have to be crop circles. It can be ghost stories, paranormal encounters, hodag encounters. You might have ridden a hodag across the Sahara Desert. Whatever you want to write us, you can do that at ghostsinthemountains@gmail.com. And ghostsinthemountains.com is our hub for everything that we do. We do new episodes of our main show every single Wednesday. They come out, along with, for our paid Patreon subscribers, we have our after show, which is called The Midnight Broadcast. And, With UFOs and UFO adjacent subjects, well, we're living in a veritable cornucopia of information at this point.
And disinformation.
Oh, hell yeah. With the recent government disclosure, the first wave of disclosure information, well, we might get into that just a little bit on the midnight broadcast. And, further our conversation around the crop circles and everything UFO related because, well, there's some new shit out there to look at, and we're going to break some of that down for you. So, anyway, thank you, everybody, our loyal listeners, for sticking with us, and we'll catch you next week on another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. Stay spooky, everybody. So, DCB, the people that make the crop circles, they like to call themselves croppies.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reminds me of the people that are big Ghostbusters fans. They go to these conventions and they call themselves the Ghost Heads. And then my wife was thinking, she's like, what do people call themselves at the Ninja Turtles conventions? Turtle Heads? My wife is brilliant. I love her very much, and she makes me laugh my ass off. Love you, darling. There's your Keister egg. Stick around, Turtle Heads. We'll be on the midnight broadcast shortly. Good night.